Hello and welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. I'm your host, Emma Thomas, and our guest this time is Skylar Liberty Rose. She's a writer and a coach who helps introvert women embrace their 40s and 50s with joy and confidence. Born in London, she moved to New York City when she was 40, and after reaching her mid-40s, she found herself feeling despondent about ageing and struggling with her appearance. It was this experience that prompted her to disentangle herself from the clutches of an anti-aging culture and enjoy a freedom she'd never before experienced. She now helps other women do the same through her Visible course and her You to Bloom membership. Welcome to the podcast, Skylar.
Thank you so much, Emma. It is a joy to be here with you today.
Do you prefer Skylar or Skylar Liberty, or how do you?
Yeah, no, Liberty is my middle name, so
Okay.
Skylar is absolutely fine.
And you changed your birth name in your 30s, didn't you?
I did.
One of your reinventions.
Much to everyone's surprise and my own. I decided to do it because I got divorced I was married in my early 20s. We separated in my early 20s, but it wasn't until my early 30s that we got divorced. And I knew that I didn't want to go back to my maiden name. That just did not feel like a fit for me at all. So I decided to change my last name, which felt really wild and out there from a very conventional, traditional family. This is not the kind of thing we do. And I decided to just have a whole new last name. And as I was trying to figure out what that last name would be, I was kind of working with a coach who said to me, well, maybe you want to change your first name as well. And I said, oh, no, I absolutely not. Couldn't do that. No. I like my first name. Exactly. And that planted the seed. And I think it was within a week, I said to her, I want to do it. I absolutely want to do it. And of course, everyone in my family, my friends were like, oh dear, here she goes, because this was quite out of character for me. And I think that they thought I was still reeling from the divorce or just having some kind of meltdown. And it was the best decision that I've probably ever made for myself. And it sparked a whole chain of events that felt incredibly empowering and really symbolic of me. I was going to say taking back the reins of my life, but I actually want to say taking the reins for the first time. So yes, not my birth name, a chosen name, and it just opened up so many opportunities for me because I started to recognize that I could reinvent myself and that I could make different choices, and I didn't have to do the expected thing, which I had pretty much done all of my life up until then.
It's almost like a sort of a marker in the ground for that agency. It's like, yeah, because it's
absolutely
it's not something that people do very often, is it? It is a fairly drastic change, I guess. I mean, I guess a lot of people change their surname for fairly obvious reasons, but to change your name completely is something quite unusual. And yeah, did you feel very different in that sort of before and after? Did you mark it with a ceremony of some kind?
I did. And it's so funny that you say that, because it was very awkward as well, actually, because I had just started a new job. So I had started with my old name and I'd been there about 3 weeks and then decided that I was going to change my name. So I had to go to my bosses and say, oh, the person that you thought you'd employed, I'm not actually going to go by that name anymore. I'm going to go by this name. And I could see my manager's eyes just kind of like, he was trying to hold it together, trying not to widen his eyes. And I just knew that they were thinking, oh, dear God, what is going on here? Exactly. But I really did have this idea that I got to become this new person. And I did, but I also put a lot of pressure on myself because in my eyes, once Skylar was born, she got to be really confident. She got to be successful. She got to be not an introvert. She got to be extrovert and engaging and lively and never tired, never upset, never angry, never in a bad mood. I mean, come on now. What a ridiculous expectation to put on anyone. And so although I was very energized by the idea of becoming this new person, allowing parts of me that I'd never really fully realized or even given myself permission to consider that I could be, I also pretty much came up with a fictional character who just wasn't going to work in reality. So the first time that I felt like I messed up as this new person, I was really hard on myself. And then I just went through a realization of, okay, I get to just be human and mess up like I always did. This might be a new beginning for me in many ways, and it was. But look, you don't just stop being human just because you change your name. You get tired. You have arguments with friends and family. Real life continues. But yeah, it's, as I say, it was energizing and empowering, and I've never ever regretted it, not a single time.
And I guess for many of us, it feels a bit like midlife is an inflection point, an opportunity to do a bit of rethinking, reinvention. But that wasn't necessarily the only time that you sort of reinvented yourself. You also completely left the UK to move to the US and start over. How was and obviously that was as Skylar, your current incarnation. How was that, and how did that come about?
Well, I was lived in London pretty much all my life, and I had a photography stand at Spitalfields Market just for a day at the weekend. They were doing this special photography takeover of Spitalfields, and I had a stand because I used to enjoy photography, or still do, as a hobby. And my now husband came to the stand, and he's a photographer, and we got chatting over my photos. We didn't go out on our first date until 2 years after we first met, because I was actually dating somebody, and then I was due to go on a 6-month solo trip to India. But we kept in touch, and then 2 years later, we had a couple of messages going backwards and forwards, and we decided to go out for a drink. We both nearly cancelled on that day because I hadn't slept the night before. I was super, super tired, and I think he was really busy. Anyway, long story short, out we went, and went out on a few dates, but then he had to come back to the States. He was born in England but grew up in New York City, and was back in England when we met, but he had to come back to the States to live for family reasons. His mum was very ill at the time, and I was like, well, I don't know how this is going to work, because we've only been out on a few dates. I can't really say to him, well, what about me? Do I get to come with you? We really didn't know how it would work out. So we started doing long distance. There wasn't FaceTime, or we weren't really using Instagram in those days. We got married 10 years ago now. Mm-hmm. So we started doing long distance, and it worked. We would Skype each other and do flights backwards and forwards whenever we could, whenever we saved up and could, make the airfare. And then we decided to take the plunge, get married, and the rest is history. I've been here ever since. So it was a great move to make. So I got to New York just before my 40th birthday, and it felt very symbolic of, this is a whole new chapter. I get to start 40 as a new person, in a marriage that I'm very, very happy in a city that I absolutely loved. So it's felt very energizing. Although I would say, after 10 years and leaning more and more into my introvert self, now, much as I love the city, I'm like, get me back into nature, or just get me into nature, because I've always lived in cities, and I love them, as in they're very energizing and creatively inspiring. But my goodness, I kind of just need to be around the trees right now, and not all the people, not all the people.
All the people all the time. You talk quite a lot, both on Instagram and on your blog, about that sort of introversion. And I think I flagged up when we were emailing a blog post that you'd written about the ways that midlife impacts introverts differently. which I've found really, really interesting, because I think I'm an introvert, although probably people meeting me might think I'm an extrovert. So I'm not quite sure how that works. But yeah, you sort of talk a bit about the fact that we're almost being kind of pushed to get out there and, like I said, sort of reinvent ourselves, not be silenced, not kind of cower in the shadows. So I just thought that would be really interesting to unpack a bit more, because I don't think it's something that we talk about a great deal.
Yeah, and I mean, you might even be ambivert. I mean, there's a lot of people aren't, necessarily fully introvert or fully extrovert. Some people are somewhere in between, or different circumstances brings out different parts of their personality type or preference. I am 1,000% an introvert, but I absolutely love connecting with people. So depending on what setting people meet me in, they can be really surprised when they find out that, yeah, I'm a big introvert. But there's no real evidence to say that when it comes to midlife and this really transitional time that we experience, that introverts or extroverts have a better or worse experience. But as introverts, we have certain tendencies, certain characteristics that we might need to honor in a different way. So I do say that many midlife spaces are really geared towards living out loud and taking up lots of space as a pushback against sliding into invisibility. And that can be really overwhelming for those of us who identify as introvert. That's not necessarily what we want. The thought of being forced into the spotlight doesn't sit well with
right
us.
out of your comfort zone.
So yeah, exactly. But there's absolutely a way for us to expand our horizons, to really be present and feel fulfilled in our lives without doing that. And that's what I aim to do with the women I work with, who are largely introvert, some ambivert. I don't think I'm working with anyone who's extrovert. Different energies attract different people. And I think a lot of the women that end up working with me or being part of my community in some way do identify as at least a little bit introvert. But yeah, I think it's at this stage of our lives, it's really important to honor where we are now, who we are now. And it's a time where we can break away from some of the restrictions, the boxes that we felt as though we've been put in by other people for maybe all of our lives up until this point. Because, if you think about it, we're raised, obviously, we go to school, we then begin either further education or jobs, and then we either continue along that line or we end up having families. I mean, I'm generalizing here. I know that there are other choices to be made, but a lot of the time we move from role to role to role, and our identities are so wrapped up within those roles that sometimes we don't actually know who we are without them. And in midlife, I think that there's so much that's just blown out of the water. We get to, there's a lot that's changing, and our identities, suddenly we are questioning, well, who am I? Who am I now? Who am I if I'm not a parent to young children? Who am I if my kids have moved out? Who am I if I don't have kids? Who am I if I decide to completely switch careers? There's so much happening, and I think that it's a great time to reassess who we are, and also to really honor who we are now and what we need now. And so, yeah, for introverts, we tend to need a lot of time to process, a lot of time to kind of take stock of situations. And we don't really get that in midlife, because if we're going through perimenopause or menopause, everything is changing. So we've got all that change happening within our bodies. There's external change, often in our job, careers, family situations. So it's a time when we really need to really honor ourselves as much as possible and anchor down as much as possible. And I think for introverts especially, because we We can sometimes overthink things. We can spend a lot of time in isolation because we like to spend blocks of time alone. It's great for us to connect with our people in the community. The single biggest thing that I've realized for myself is that I can't do all of this on my own. I can't do midlife on my own, and I'm not meant to. I don't think any of us are meant to. And so cultivating community has made all the difference to me, because I no longer feel as though it's just me in isolation trying to figure everything out.
Yeah. And you can do that on your own terms and in your own time and space.
Absolutely.
I think it's Kate Codrington in her book who describes it as a little bit like the sort of chrysalis, the pupation stage of from caterpillar to butterfly, that you kind of have to have that time to kind of be closed off and let everything get a bit messy and give it that time before you can then emerge. And maybe not all of us are big showy butterflies. Some of us are moths with subtle patination.
Exactly. And that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think any of us need to put any more pressure on ourselves to be who we're not. And I used to do that. I used to look at other people and be like, oh, why can't you be more like that person? Look at her. She's out there doing her thing and in big groups and feeling so comfortable. And that's not me. And so I only recently, in the last year or two, actually started identifying publicly as introvert and actually weaving that into my website so other people know, like, oh, this is who she is, and not feeling as though it was something that I had to be ashamed of or work on, that it's a failing or a flaw that I need to improve so I can be more extrovert and get out there and be more comfortable in big groups. That's not something that works for me. So
and I think you were talking about the sort of expectations as well. You talk also at great length both on social media and on your blog about the sort of the expectations placed on us in terms of the sort of aging and sort of keeping our our looks, our appeal, or it's almost like we've now got another thing to add to our to-do list, is right. We've got to age gracefully and beautifully, and we're not allowed to kind of just go and quietly sit and do some knitting. We've got to be starting new companies and reinventing our style and having flawless glowy skin. I mean, it is a lot. How do we untangle ourselves from all of that, expectation?
It takes work. It does, because we have been socialized since forever to believe that this is what's important, that whatever else we're experiencing in our lives as women, how we look while we're going through any of those experiences is the ultimate thing, that's what's important. And it's so pervasive and we're so used to it that we rarely even recognize it anymore. It's just part and parcel of being a woman in this world. And when we get to our 40s and we start to notice visible changes, visible signs of aging, which is what I experienced, I think I was about 44 when I really noticed it. It didn't happen overnight at 40, but by 44, I was like, oh, my skin is changing. I have sagging skin under my chin. I have sagging skin pretty much all over my body in different parts. It's a different body than it was when I was in my 20s and 30s, for sure. And I remember catching sight of myself in a vanity mirror, and the angle of the mirror and the angle of my chin, I saw this skin sagging and I was horrified, absolutely horrified. And I remember thinking, well, don't sit like that when you're with other people, because then they'll see it. So let me figure out an angle that I can sit at so nobody sees this sagging skin on my face. And then in the next breath, I was like, oh no, you don't do that. That's not who you are. Don't do that. And what I did instead, which is much more who I am, I took a picture highlighting it instead of hiding it, and I shared it on social media because I just had this moment of, no, I've done this for decades now. I've played the game. I've tried to do all the right things during my life in terms of what's expected of a woman. And how content do I feel with any of it? How fulfilled do I feel? And is this what I'm going to do now in my fifth decade or sixth decade or seventh decade, or however long I'm lucky enough to live? I'm going to look in the mirror and actually come up with some angles that I can sit or stand in front of other people so that they see me in my best light. I mean, that's just exhausting and ridiculous. And once I realized that, I was just able to start the process of disentangling myself. And it's not easy. It's not that I wake up every day and see my skin the way it is these days and feel great about it. I don't. I do have my insecurities for sure. And again, community has been a game changer. We need each other. We need to bolster one another and not struggle through this whole culture of anti-aging, which is so linked to diet culture and all the other oppressive cultures that we have just normalized in our world. We can't do it on our own. We really have to come together in community and recognize this is not serving us. This is not what is in our best interests at this stage of life, and it never was. But we typically go along with it and feel that we have to, in order to get that societal approval that most of us seek, we have to meet these beauty standards that are all about us just spending countless money and pounds and dollars, euros, whatever, on trying to look a certain way. And I don't want to succumb to it to the degree that I used to.
And I guess Instagram is a bit of a double-edged sword on that, because on the one hand, we can be exposed to, dozens and dozens of, fantastic accounts where, people like yourselves are sort of, being totally unapologetic about who they are and very real, and people who are talking about their journey to sort of growing out their greys or whatever, or sort of being fantastically stylish on there. But the flip side of it is then that we are perhaps also, comes back to that comparisonitis, isn't it? It's like, oh well, I'm the same age as that person and I don't look that glamorous, or like
Yeah, we all have, I think, those moments. And I think it's really important to just accept them when they come or notice them when they come. But again, just when I changed my name and I had this idea that I'd become this perfect person, and I found out very quickly that that wasn't going to happen. It's the same with disentangling ourselves from a culture of anti-aging. We're going to have moments where we do compare ourselves to other people, whether it's our hair, our bodies, our skin, our relationships, our homes, whatever. There's always something that we can compare. And I think, again, human nature, give yourself a moment to be human and then get curious. Just a gentle curiosity is all it takes. I wonder why that's important to me. Where did that thought come from? And just noticing these thought patterns and trying to interrupt them. We don't necessarily have to swoop in and do an instant reframe of everything. But once you start to recognize that this is a culture that doesn't serve us, it serves the beauty industry, and they're making their billions off of our insecurities. So once you start to recognize that, it does become easier to step back from. So even when you do have those moments of comparing yourself, they're more fleeting and they're not as painful as perhaps they once were, where I know I used to fixate on comparing myself to other people and what they had and I didn't. And I don't do that to that degree anymore. If I have a moment like that, it's brief and relatively painless.
And do you think your experience last year of being diagnosed with a brain tumour and sort of what you then went through as a result of that, has that brought that into even more sort of sharp focus?
I always thought that it would, I always thought if something big happened in my life, I would be able to really stop sweating the small stuff. And I have to tell you, Emma, the exact opposite happened, at least originally, like directly after the diagnosis. I'd been feeling sick for a number of months. I was being diagnosed with vertigo. People kept doing the Epley maneuver. I was getting medication for vertigo. Nothing was working. And then I got an MRI in January of last year, February of last year, and they literally had to do a craniotomy within a week. So it all happened very, very quickly. It was a benign brain tumor, but it was causing some chaos in my head. And yeah, there was a lot of vomiting and just feeling dreadful. I had to sort of learn how to get around again with a walker, a Zimmer frame. So yeah, you would think, I would have thought that something like that happening, I would just be able to let go of everything else. And I didn't. I doubled down on all the things I wanted to control. And I remember coming home from the hospital, and my husband had put the towels on the towel rail in the bathroom, what I considered to be the wrong way. And I had a meltdown about it. I literally had a meltdown. And I called him in. I mean, I couldn't even stand up. I had this walking frame in the bathroom, and I was like, you can't hang them like that. You can't hang them. It has to be this way. Bless him and his literally limitless patience. He put them the right way, because he obviously did not understand.
It wasn't about the towels.
It was absolutely not about the towels. And he just understood that, okay, this is what she needs to happen. And that's the kind of thing that was happening. Because I'd lost complete control of my body at that time, in as much as, this tumor was wreaking havoc. And so it felt really important to me to control the things that I could and some that I couldn't. So it's been a journey in letting go and recognizing that I can steer my life in the way that I want to, and the direction that I hope it will go in. And I have to be honest with myself about the things that I can't control. And I think, bringing it back to midlife again, there's so much pressure on us, with us juggling so many things. Why do any of us want to control more than we need to? So it's a process for me. It's not something. I am somebody who likes to be in control, so it's a process. But with regards to specifically the anti-aging stuff, I am absolutely more appreciative of my body. I think I have been for a number of years, but especially now. I refuse to be ashamed about anything on my body, in my body. If we're all here right now, we've survived this pandemic that is still a pandemic. Many of us have survived a huge amount of loss and grief over the last couple of years alone. Really, are we really going to spend our precious lives going forward criticizing ourselves and feeling terrible about how we look as we're aging, or how we're failing because we're not where we expected to be in life? There's such a ridiculous amount of pressure on all of us. And so I'm able to step away from that kind of stuff with more ease than I used to be able to.
I think even just on Friday, I was out with a friend who doesn't do social media at all. So there's no point me even tagging her or talking about it on social media, but, rightly called me out for kind of criticizing my sort of slightly rounder than I would like tummy. And, in terms of what I was wearing, and feeling self-conscious about it. And I was really grateful to her, because I was like, well, I wouldn't say those things in front of my daughter, who is almost 10. So why would I say them about myself just because she's not there? Does it really matter?
Right.
And did it, and actually, apart from that fleeting moment of insecurity, did it make any difference at all to the enjoyment that I had of that evening? Absolutely bugger all.
Exactly.
But yeah, it is the it's the water we swim in, and it's very, very difficult to to get away from it, because we have just had it drummed into us from all sides since birth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not easy. And again, that's the power of kind of being in community with other people. It doesn't have to be a huge group. It can just be sometimes a conversation with one friend who brings you back to what's important. And I think, again, we need each other. We need to bolster each other in these ways, because we're not always that kind and compassionate towards ourselves. I mean, you wouldn't dream of saying that to somebody else, but the dialogue that we have about our own bodies can be very, very critical.
And I think something else that we share perhaps is I've just newly started HRT, hormone therapy, and you're just about to start. Is that right? You were talking about it on.
Listen, the bell might ring while we're on this podcast, because my hormones are being delivered today. And to say that it's a vaginal insert. So yeah, I was going to say that I'll be slapping it on, but it would actually be more of an insertion. Immediately is an understatement, because I cannot wait. It's been a really rough ride with so many symptoms, and I'm ready. I've been doing all the things, the exercise, the nutrition, the mindfulness practices, and anxiety for me has been through the roof. And I'm very ready to do what I can with hormone therapy to support myself in that way, as part of a holistic process, not just let me just take HRT and it will be a magic cure. I don't know, but I definitely am ready and willing to try.
I think so many people don't realise that anxiety is incredibly common, and really debilitating. And I think for a lot of women as well, it could well be the first time in their lives that they're experiencing that anxiety seemingly out of nowhere. And if you don't sort of join the dots and understand kind of where that's coming from, it can be really difficult. So yeah, I think everyone who's talking about it openly on social media, sharing their experience, that's only a good thing, and kind of help people understand perhaps what might be going on for them.
Yeah, because there can be such a lot of stigma and shame about anything to do with our mental health still, even though we're typically more open about things these days. And so it has become really important to me to talk specifically about it, and not to feel as though that's somehow detrimental to me as a coach or somebody working with other women, that, oh, I can't be trusted to help other people if I am dealing with my own mental health issues. I just don't want to ever present myself to anybody as this perfect person that's got their life completely together, because that has never been my reality, and I'm pretty sure it never will be. But I do have a lot of tools that I use. I am able to work through things in a way that I didn't used to be able to in my 30s, or even when I turned 40, my very early 40s. So yeah, I think it's important that, especially as women, we don't feel that we have to turn up in this state of perfection at all times, whether it's how we look, how we behave. I am really having a hard time with anxiety at the moment. And, Emma, I think it might have been you that, and tell me if I'm wrong, may have commented on an Instagram post, I think somebody else's Instagram post, about ADHD. And I think I said, oh, it's interesting that so many people are being diagnosed with ADHD in midlife. And I think it was you that said that you had somebody on your podcast that said that it's not necessarily that it's just happening, it's just that they've been able to mask it well up until now.
The coping strategies, and then suddenly it's that overwhelm, isn't it? And you don't have to be somebody living with ADHD to have the overwhelm, but I think we're because ADHD shows up very differently kind of in a female body as opposed to a male one, that girls and then young women and then older women are very good at masking and kind of coping and then suddenly they don't cope anymore because it just all becomes too much, and and then suddenly it kind of the cracks start to show, and presumably also at the same time, if they do have children that are presenting with ADHD and getting them assessed, it's very common then for that sort of that light bulb moment, and suddenly for them to think, okay, that's why X, Y, Z, and to sort of get that realization that it's something that actually they've been living with their entire lives, but they've been able to sort of successfully cover it up, if you like, or just overcompensate, and it's that sort of inability to kind of keep papering over the cracks that suddenly kind of comes to the fore. And I know a lot of women who have had that sort of later life diagnosis. And I'll pop a link. It was Kate Mori-Youssef, and she's got a whole podcast actually that's dedicated to ADHD and women's well-being, which is rightly very popular. But yeah, anyway, that's maybe a good place to start wrapping up, and to say thank you so much for sharing your story. And I will make sure that we put links to your website and where to find you on social media, so that people can, if they're not already following you, come and find you.
Thank you.
Is it anything in particular that you feel like you wished somebody had told you before you kind of went into perimenopause? What do you wish that you had known?
Oh my God. So much. But honestly, I don't know what I would have been interested in hearing when I wasn't in perimenopause. I feel as though we're not always ready to receive the information that we'll need until we're at the stage when we'll need it, when we actually need it. And I mean, my mum had a hysterectomy and was put into instant menopause when she was younger than me, which of course, when I was younger, were way off. So well, mum's old. Like, she wasn't old; she was in her early 40s. And I kind of had a vague understanding of HRT. She was on patches at the time, but I wasn't really interested in finding out the detail or knowing any more about it. So there's a lot of things that I needed to know, but that I probably wasn't interested in knowing. But I do think that because of how we're talking differently about midlife, menopause, perimenopause, we are using technology in ways that we weren't before. Our mothers didn't have podcasts like yours to help women.
Telemedicine,
with
all
issues.
That stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I do think that the conversation is definitely increasing and broadening. And so with that, I think there will be stuff that will trickle down to the younger generation. So it might not be quite the shock that it has been for some of us who have just arrived in this chaotic stage and are kind of like, wait a minute, why did nobody warn us? But yeah, I mean, each age, each decade, each stage has its own challenges and awesome moments. So I think each of us just has to embrace what is unfolding in front of us at the time that it's unfolding. So that's as much wisdom as I can give about that, unfortunately.
That's a very, very, very true. Thank you so much, Skylar, for joining us. It's been lovely meeting you and having the opportunity to chat.
Thank you, Emma. It has been a delight, and I'm really grateful to have spent this time with you. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.midlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.